you tell your story where you are now. We're here with the Education Fix, and I'll let you do your intro, but we're really going to talk a lot about sort of innovations during this really challenging and ever-changing time now. But Peter, welcome.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, you're right. Proud Canadian, and spent most of my education career working in Ontario, so in the most populous province in Canada. But yeah, working in a different and unique job right now. So I'm currently a principal working actually for the Canadian military. So I still work for my school board at home, but they've lent me out to the Canadian Department of National Defence, and I act as the principal for the Canadian section on NATO's headquarter base. So the school actually is part of 8 different nations that host different schools, including 3 American schools. We've got a Canadian school. I share a building with a UK school, and I'm one of 11 principals there. But that's kind of the tail end of a long career. So it's my 5th school as a school leader, and it's been a fantastic experience.
Where are you in the world, Peter, for our viewers?
So I'm in Belgium. I'm in near Casto, Belgium, which is where SHAPE is. So SHAPE actually stands for Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. So it's NATO's strategic headquarters, and I live about 20 minutes from there.
Excellent. So we were talking. We've talked a few weeks ago. Started talking a little bit about this, and we were talking off air about innovation in schools in sort of this post-pandemic era, and what does that mean, and balancing that between innovation and hey, we have to actually educate our kids at the same time. And you had some really interesting insights on that. So just, I guess, start off with that, and we'll do some follow-up questions as well.
Yeah, well, I guess to me, I always think, the most, and I'm coming at this from my role as a school leader. I've always thought that relationships are paramount. They're the relationships that we build with kids. And I think that learning, goes a long way to supporting those relationships. And I think right now, in the time that we're in during, the COVID-19 pandemic, what we've highlighted is the absolute critical role that relationships play in learning. Where schools are struggling is where our kids aren't, able to connect face to face. So we've got all kinds of innovative things that we're doing to try and get them, in the same way you and I right now, we're talking like as if we're in the same room, but we're separated by 6,000 miles and, half a dozen time zones. And kids, although we've been innovative in those approaches, I firmly believe that they're missing that human element. They're missing that relationship piece. That to me is always, always paramount. So what I'm hoping in a post-pandemic world is that we recognize that those connections, that contact that students have with each other, that students have with their educators, that students in particular have with the school leaders, is going to be kind of refreshed and renewed. That, and again, I always think of my role as a principal. I think to my colleagues out there, this should highlight to us the importance of being out of our offices and in our buildings, being in our classrooms where our students are, and being, another person who can support the student to student, student to school, student to staff relationship. Well, that would be the most important thing I think we've learned out of this time. Innovations aside.
I'm gonna press you on this too. Can we do that? How can we do that? Say we stay in hybrid or go back fully online because it's, unfortunately ramping up as far as the number of cases go everywhere now. As predicted, we said the winter is coming, Game of Thrones kind of thing. So how do we, is it possible? And if so, what are your suggestions to fix this issue if we could?
Okay. So, and maybe my answer won't be popular. So no, I don't think it's possible. So I don't think it's possible to recreate the relationships that we would have face to face. But I think we have, so that's the first thing I think we have to recognize. We've got to recognize that if we're trying to rebuild brick and mortar schools in an online environment, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure. That's not to say that we can't build relationships that students can't build relationships with each other and with schools online, but it's not going to look the same. and I guess what I'm thinking more of a post-pandemic world where when we can get together safely, that we're highlighting the importance of those relationships for learning. That I think we've understood perhaps more in the last 8 months than we have in years prior, that learning is a social endeavor, that the best way to learn is to be able to be with others and to be able to bounce ideas and to have discourse, and to talk and to be connected. Because I think of the increase in things like student mental health issues for kids that are not connected. We're now starting to see those ideas of isolation, and that kids are struggling not being with other kids. So I'll summarize that. You said, what can we learn? Well, I think we can learn that we can't do things the way we have. But then I also think that there are some great ways to be able to connect. And I'm going to use one example, if I can, from my own practice, because that's kind of where we draw from. And it had very little to do with learning, and it had everything to do with connection. So March 13th, like a lot of other jurisdictions, we went completely online, and we stayed online from March 13th to 2020 until the end of June 2020. And as we started to adapt, what we were doing, I did, like, many of my colleagues, I started to house assemblies. So every day we would get together to start off our day, and I would connect with the school. I have a very small school. We're less than 100 kids. But we would meet and we would kind of go over the day's message. We would just connect in that way. And for the first couple of weeks when we got online, I didn't do that. We were just trying to find our feet. So what are we going to do? What's school going to look like for us? And then starting around the 22nd or 23rd of March, every morning I would record a message and I would share it. I'd share it on our school's Facebook page. I would share it via a student's Google Classroom. I would send it to email. And my wife was, out in our community a couple of months later, and she had one of our parents come and talk to her. And she said, I just want you to let Peter know how connected we felt to the school simply because we were hearing his voice every day. It was a minute, maybe two. And as she started to tell her story and the impact that it had on them at home, she was welling up. And to me, I thought, I didn't do anything other than, record what I would typically do on a morning. Sometimes I was kind of goofy, it was just kind of being myself, but putting a pause or putting a start to the day was giving kids an opportunity to visibly see their school leader. They would spend all kinds of time with their teachers, but they weren't seeing anybody else. So it was one other way to kind of to sort of build that community connection. And it was a small way. And I never reflected on the fact that it would have the kind of impact that it did, but it did. To me, it highlights one of the three things I think that are critical for a school leader, which is visibility. And I don't know, it made me think, that small act had a huge impact. I was not looking at data in math or language. I was not looking at our reading scores. I was not in any way supporting small group instruction. It in many ways had nothing to do with learning, but also had everything to do with learning. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Al, or not.
No, it really does. It makes a lot of sense. I think for me, and when you started out with the statement that you don't, it could be unpopular, that you don't know that it could be possible in an online space. I think you actually gave an example where it is possible of doing it in an online space. I think I lean more towards, as far as making students successful in this remote world or whatever combination, because the reality is I think people want to either be face-to-face, or they want to be hybrid, or they want fully online, and they're expecting that it's going to be one of those three options. The reality is, for the next year, maybe it's going to be a combination of those options, right?
I agree.
So for us as educators, I don't know that I agree with we can't, it is impossible or not possible to do it in an online space. I think more that we have to learn how we may or can do it in the online space. I think it will always be different, but different does not mean one is more effective or less effective than the other. I think right now, obviously face-to-face is more effective because that's what's tried and true. That's what we've done forever. but I don't know. I'm not sure that we can't get there in the online space, given the technology that's available. And I think more importantly, future technologies that may be available. And I'm talking about, you know, Oasis kind of stuff. If you ever saw Ready Player One with virtual learning, and every
Absolutely.
kid has a virtual headset kind of thing. But I don't know, your thoughts on that. Do you think truly think it, because what you said about your messaging was kind of against
Of
what
course.
you originally said, right? And
Yeah.
that's okay because we're having a
Yeah.
conversation about this.
Yeah.
But is it more that we're just not aware and understanding how to make those connections in the online space, or is it just, hey, there's no way virtual will ever be the same as face to face, or as I don't think it ever will be. They're not the same, but
Right.
as effective as face to face. What are your thoughts on that?
So, and I think you did the same thing that I did. I think you talked about things being, as effective and online, but have said that online at this point will never
I
replace
did.
face
You're
to
right. I
face.
did. You're exactly right.
Which, so I actually think we're probably more on the same page than we
Yeah, you're
think.
probably right. Exactly.
I have to agree, because I think what we haven't done yet is we haven't tapped the full potential of what innovative learning in online spaces can be. Because yeah, the example I gave you is a small example, and I think there are people doing incredible things with current technology to make a school feel like a school and a classroom feel like a classroom. Even giving students student voice and agency around, well, some of the things that I think of how people have shifted, for example, in their online ideas. So at first it was like, I want to see the child and in the camera, and I because I make sure that they're engaged. And now people are moving away from that and saying, well, wait a minute, we're inviting each other into our private space, and maybe the student wants to turn the camera off because they don't want you to see, what their room looks like and whatnot, and allowing students to kind of own their space in the same way they'd own their desk. They might, put some things in there, or, I think of a high school student with their locker, they've got certain things that they can put in, they can make the space theirs. I think we've come a long way to try and do that. And I think as we start to do those things, we're going to get better and better and better with online. As far as future technology goes, I'll just do a plug because I'm a dad of 2 adult kids. I love them both dearly. My daughter is a nurse, frontline worker right now. My son right now is the coolest job on the planet, I think. He designs virtual reality spaces for training facilities. So his job is to go in and code in environments that would be possibly unsafe to be able to be in real life. And he creates an environment so somebody could, through a headset, go in and train until they're ready to kind of do, sort of the real thing. So think flight simulator, but think in all kinds of other different sort of heavy machinery industries and whatnot. To me, that's an example of exactly where classroom learning can go and will likely go 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. I don't know. But like, and then think of the potential of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
we see pieces of it now with augmented reality and with virtual reality, things like field trips and the ability to travel forward and backwards in time, and all these kinds of things to be able to do. Like, those opportunities may supersede the kind of learning that we can offer right now. I just think right now, with the technology we have, I still think that the face-to-face experience is the best experience that we've got. That, I'm not saying that we can't work really hard to make the online experience great, and because we have. And again, I'll tout, my own staff, who literally from one Friday to the next Monday took a brick and mortar school and made it an online school. We were up and ready to go. We shut down on the 10th of March, 13th of March. We're offering our first online kind of experiences. But I don't think any of them would tell you that it was the same experience, that we were able to offer in person.
And maybe we'll have you on again and really talk this through, because as you were saying it, as I was talking myself, I think, to make it more concrete, a thought in my mind, it is always going to be different, but can we make it as effective as face to face, or even more effective as technology grows, as we learn about this space, as we are innovative as far as solutions to learning. I think if at its base, this shift back and forth to these different environments, modalities, we're looking at instruction again, which is really important, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at how effective we are with instruction. We're looking at the clarity of messaging, like you're talking about, from a leadership perspective, from a teacher to student perspective. We're empathizing with what teachers are going through, leaders are going through, students going, parents. Questions that should always be high up on our list when we're as educators, but have really come to the forefront. So that's one of the really, I think, positive things that has come out of this that does inspire innovation and change, right?
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. We because we've had to revisit and re-question almost everything that we've done, it really has given us an opportunity to say, are we doing this well, and how can we do it better? Yeah. For sure.
So,
that's a question that everybody's asking, in almost every capacity of education, including your president-elect, who, mentioned the idea of, changes in education, and touted, Dr. Jill Biden as an educator. Like, so, like talk, all kinds of talk about innovation that I imagine is going to be coming at some point in time as well. So
who I think will probably be must be the first doctor first lady ever, right? I haven't looked at it, but it's definitely a unique thing to be a doctor and a first lady, right?
So yes, except in the real world, but I would also say that, my favorite American, and as a non-American, my favorite president still has to be President Josiah Bartlett, and his wife, Dr. Bartlett, would have also been a doctor first lady, but that's fictional, but
we were talking to just as far as our president-elect and vice president-elect, the messaging behind, and I was actually on with Dr. Darren Pepper just before you. We were talking about how the messaging behind just understanding of both sides of the equation, understanding of all stakeholders. And I think for us as educators, and if we really want to make sure that, because you can innovate, right? And you could think it's great as a leader, or a teacher can innovate, but it may not be so great if you take this big leap towards some other way of delivering instruction, especially in the online or blended space.
Yeah.
One student who's tech savvy and really loves that kind of thing may excel, but other students, and I could use my own daughter as an example, she hates to be on camera. She gets really anxious. She's not really disciplined with staying on task online. She kind of goes off task when she's even listening to an online instructor. She's not really held as accountable by every teacher in each of her classes. And she's in middle school, so it's that like kind of phase where they're not really sure about learning independently. They still need some guidance, but we still have to coach them sort of to be independent. So as far as like innovation goes, we really have to understand every stakeholder and where they're coming from, similar to what we have to do now in America, and understand that, hey, some people voted for the president-elect, some people didn't, and we need to all understand everybody and everyone in between.
Yeah, you're talking about your daughter. That was interesting, because I always think that brings up the questions around, so when somebody is either, not engaged, or, they're not sure how to work independently online, then we start to have to ask those questions around, well, yeah, how do we treat the student who is tech savvy versus the one who may not be, or the one, I think of my wife when I, and hopefully I won't get in trouble for putting this into a podcast, but I'll watch, she's got her browser open and she's got 30 tabs open across the way, because at some point in time, she knows that she wants that information available, and she's going to click on it. To me, I couldn't work that way. That would be absolutely and utterly distracting. It'd be one tab at a time, whatever windows I have. Are we teaching kids to know themselves as learners, both online and in person? And I guess my answer to that is, I don't think we are yet, but we're having those conversations. If that's going to help us innovate, then I think that's fantastic, because we're thinking about those things, right?
And I love that. So have students know themselves as learners,
Yeah.
I've thought about this, but you really articulated it really well, I think, because we don't give that time. We don't give that time for kids to reflect and understand who they are, how they learn, what they need to do to succeed, as a self-reflective piece too. Like they have to understand that. We could tell them, I could analyze my daughter and tell you X, Y, Z about how she learns. But if she's not coming to that and understanding that herself, there's very little value beyond me helping her a little bit here or there, right?
Sure. And knowing that she's likely going to change as a learner. So, making sure that it's incumbent on us to ask those questions frequently. So, well, what do you think? Or, if a child is unsuccessful at a task, well, why do you think that was? Or what's one thing you could have done that might have made it more successful? Or like just, yeah, that idea of fostering reflection in students, as we learn better when we reflect about how we learn.
Yeah,
So
wonderful.
we grow.
So any sort of closing thoughts? I love this conversation. Like what are your, if you could give a message out there to sort of, this is the education fix, to sort of fix education and be innovative, yet still understanding of where we need to be instructionally. Like what would your closing thoughts or statement be on that?
Look, is it hard to say? I don't know. But what I would say is that as educators, we have to be asking, I think, more questions than anybody else. Like we're at a time where the world is changing quickly, technology is changing quickly. And I think we always have to ask ourselves, are we doing the best that we can to serve the students that are in front of us? And then, we have to ask that question on a frequent basis. Like, we're good with pedagogy. I did a TED talk a few years back, and I talked about, one of the three things we need to be, but one of the most important is masters of pedagogy, right? In the same way, that a doctor or a lawyer, engineers have professional sets of skills. As educators, we have professional sets of skills, and we have to master those. But because things are changing so quickly, and that idea of face-to-face, online, hybrid, we've got to ask the questions: are the tools that we're using the best tools to get to where we need to get, which ultimately is, having our students learn. So, and just to do a bit of a shout out, you and I are, part of the Codebreaker EDU family that I think is starting to have some of those, those questions through Brian and Daphne and the team that's there. So I'm excited about, about asking some of those questions in kind of that light. And like you said, if maybe you'll have me on again, you're welcome to have me on anytime you want. I would happily come back.
Yeah. And the rest of the crew will be on in those calls in the future. So you heard it from Peter LeBlanc. Thank you so much. I love, always insightful talking to you, and ask those questions frequently. I love that as well. It's not just a one-shot deal. Don't ask the questions, ponder, and let them go. It's this continuous nature of asking, looking for, what is the best solution to help students succeed. And that's evolving every day, especially in our current times. So thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate you being here. We will have you on again for sure. And I know it's a little late there too, right? It's probably a lot later than it is here.
Yeah, just after 6, not too bad.
After 6, not too bad. But so we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We will have you on again as a guest for sure. And if you could post your TEDx video, share this video. We'd love to see that TEDx video as well as a supplement to this. So thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much.